There are rivalries in sport that transcend competition. They carry history. They carry pride. They carry the accumulated weight of decades of encounters where the margin between winning and losing felt like it meant something far larger than the scoreboard ever reflected. They are the kind of rivalries where neutral fans stop being neutral the moment the first pitch is thrown, where the outcome of a single game can dominate national conversation for days, sometimes weeks, before the next chapter begins. Japan versus Korea in baseball is exactly that rivalry. It is not just a game. It has never been just a game. Every time these two nations step onto a diamond together, something electric moves through the atmosphere that no other international baseball matchup can fully replicate. The intensity is different. The silence in the dugouts between innings is different. The way players carry themselves to the plate, knowing exactly what the person throwing the ball represents, is different in a way that words struggle to capture and statistics never will. And then Shohei Ohtani stepped into the batter's box. And then Seiya Suzuki followed. And Korean fans, watching from the other side of a rivalry built on pride and history and an almost desperate desire to win, found themselves doing something nobody fully anticipated. They stopped and stared, not with anger, not with the focused intensity of fans watching an opponent they are certain they can defeat, but with something far more complicated. Something that sat uncomfortably between competitive frustration and genuine reluctance. That question, asked by Korean fans and spreading rapidly across Korean baseball communities and social media platforms, tells you everything you need to know about what Samurai Japan did to the rivalry that both nations have spent generations defining themselves through. Because when your fiercest rivals start asking whether their own pitchers have any real option except to deliberately avoid your best hitters, you have not just won a game. You have won something deeper. Before you can fully appreciate what happened, you need to understand the weight that Japan versus Korea carries in the world of international baseball. Korea has one of the most passionate baseball cultures on the planet. The KBO, the Korea Baseball Organization, draws attendance figures and television ratings that rival many established American sports leagues. Baseball is not a pastime in Korea. It is a cultural institution, a source of national identity that connects generations of fans to something larger than the individual game being played on any given night. And within that culture, the relationship with Japanese baseball is uniquely charged. The two nations share a complicated historical relationship that extends far beyond sport. When they meet on a baseball field in an international tournament, everything that history carries arrives with them. Every pitch thrown, every at-bat, every moment where one nation's best must face the other nation's best becomes a proxy for something the fans on both sides feel in their bones but rarely articulate directly. Korea has produced extraordinary baseball talent. Players who have succeeded in NPB, in MLB, and who have carried their nation to remarkable international results. The Korean national team is never an underdog in international competition. They are always a legitimate threat, always capable of delivering a result that shocks the baseball world, and always playing with a hunger that reflects exactly how much winning against Japan specifically means to their supporters. Which is precisely why what Korean fans said about Ohtani and Suzuki lands with the force it does. This was not a casual observation from fans of a weaker nation conceding defeat before the game begins. This was Korean baseball fans, among the most knowledgeable and passionate supporters in the entire international game, looking at what Samurai Japan had assembled and arriving at a conclusion that their own competitive pride made almost physically painful to voice. These two players cannot be beaten normally. They can only be avoided. To understand why Korean fans reached that conclusion, you have to understand what facing Shohei Ohtani in a high-stakes international game actually does to a pitching staff. In the regular MLB season, opposing teams have months of preparation time. Pitching coaches build detailed game plans. Analytics departments generate reports that run dozens of pages. Catchers spend hours studying tendencies, identifying patterns, constructing sequences designed to exploit whatever vulnerabilities exist in a hitter's approach. And Ohtani still hits .300 with 40 home runs and an on-base percentage that makes every at-bat feel like a negotiation the pitcher is already losing before it starts. In international tournament baseball, that preparation window collapses almost entirely. Teams face each other with days of preparation at most, sometimes less. The game plans are thinner. The pitching staffs are smaller. The margin for error shrinks to almost nothing because there is no next series, no chance to adjust over 3 games and come back for a 4th. Every decision matters immediately, with full consequences. In that environment, Ohtani becomes something approaching an unsolvable problem. His bat speed generates contact on pitches that most hitters would foul off weakly or miss entirely. His pitch recognition allows him to lay off breaking balls that would retire 95% of the hitters in international competition. His power means that any mistake, any pitch left over the inner half of the plate, any slider that does not finish where the catcher intended it to, becomes a ball that travels distances that silence a crowd instantly. Korean pitching coaches facing that reality in a tournament where every run matters enormously, where the margin between advancing and going home can be a single swing, are left with a calculation that has no clean answer. Challenge Ohtani with your best stuff and accept that your best stuff may not be good enough. Or pitch around him, load the bases, and take your chances with the hitters behind him in a lineup that is not exactly forgiving. Korean fans watching their pitching staff work through that calculation in real time understood instinctively what was happening. And the question that emerged from those conversations captured the dilemma with painful precision. It was not defeatism. It was baseball intelligence recognizing a situation where all available options carry significant risk and the least damaging choice may be the one that feels like surrender. If Ohtani represented the unsolvable problem, Seiya Suzuki represented the reason solving it by walking Ohtani made everything worse. This is the structural trap that Samurai Japan constructed and that Korean fans found themselves acknowledging with a mixture of frustration and reluctant admiration. Because the answer to Ohtani being too dangerous to challenge directly would logically be to pitch around him, accept the base runner, and redirect energy toward containing the hitters behind him. Except Seiya Suzuki was behind him. Suzuki's profile as a hitter presents a completely different set of problems than Ohtani's, but problems that are no less serious for a pitching staff already operating under pressure. Where Ohtani's danger is most visible in his raw power and his ability to do damage with a single swing, Suzuki's danger is more insidious. He is the kind of hitter who makes pitchers work, who forces counts deep, who disciplines himself not to expand the zone even when the pressure of the situation is screaming at him to swing at something he can reach. In international tournament baseball, where pitch counts matter enormously and bullpen depth is limited, a hitter who consistently works deep counts is not just a personal threat. He is a structural one. He degrades the pitching resource that the team needs for the innings ahead. He forces managers into decisions about their bullpen earlier than they want to make them. He creates a cumulative drain that compounds across a game and across a tournament. Put Ohtani and Suzuki back-to-back in a lineup, in a tournament format where pitching depth is precious and preparation time is minimal, and you have created a combination that tests every assumption a pitching staff operates under. Korean fans watching Samurai Japan's lineup construction understood this with the clarity that comes from genuine baseball knowledge. And when they asked whether Suzuki also had no choice but to walk, the question was not rhetorical. It was a genuine acknowledgement that the lineup Samurai Japan had assembled had effectively removed the conventional tools that opposing pitching staffs rely on. You cannot challenge Ohtani without accepting enormous risk. You cannot walk him without loading the bases for Suzuki. You cannot pitch around Suzuki without exhausting your bullpen and handing Samurai Japan the kind of tactical advantage that championship-level teams convert into runs with a reliability that borders on mechanical. The Korean fans who identified this dynamic were not complaining. They were doing what the best baseball fans in any country do. They were reading the game at its deepest level and communicating what they saw with the honesty that genuine understanding enables. What happened next in those Korean fan communities and social media spaces was the part of this story that deserves the most attention. Because rivalry culture, in any sport and between any nations, tends to produce a specific kind of response when one side encounters the other's superiority. Denial, alternative explanations, critiques of officiating or circumstance that redirect the conversation away from the uncomfortable acknowledgement that the opponent was simply better. Korean baseball fans did not do that. Instead, something remarkable moved through the conversations happening online and in viewing parties and in the commentary spaces where Korean fans process what they watch together. The frustration was real. International baseball supremacy is not simply a function of having the most talented individual players. Talent alone does not win tournaments where the format is compressed, where every game carries elimination-level stakes, and where the psychological dimension of competing for your country activates something in players that individual franchise success never fully reaches. What Samurai Japan has built is a combination that addresses every dimension of what international tournament success requires. The individual excellence of Ohtani and Suzuki provides the offensive foundation that forces opponents into impossible decisions. The depth behind those two hitters means that the tactical adjustments opponents make to manage the top of the lineup simply create new problems further down. The pitching resources Japan brings into international competition reflect the extraordinary depth of talent that Japanese baseball at both the NPB and MLB levels now produces. And perhaps most importantly, the chemistry that exists within Samurai Japan, the shared cultural understanding, the collective investment in representing something larger than any individual career, the willingness to subordinate personal metrics to national outcome, creates a team that functions at a level above what its individual components would mathematically predict. Korean fans felt all of this. They felt it in the way the games played out. They felt it in the tactical problems that presented themselves without clean solutions. They felt it in the particular quality of the at-bats that Ohtani and Suzuki delivered, at-bats that seemed to operate by a different set of rules than the ones their pitching staffs had prepared to enforce. And they responded to what they felt with the most honest reaction available to them. There is a specific kind of moment in sport that only the greatest rivalries can produce. A moment where the competition is so fierce, and the excellence on display is so undeniable, that the fans on the losing side of it find themselves unable to maintain the posture of opposition that rivalry demands. Japan and Korea have been building toward one of those moments for decades. Through World Baseball Classic tournaments and Asian Championship competitions and every encounter where the stakes felt too large for the outcome to be just a game, both nations have been developing the kind of competitive relationship that makes these moments possible. What Korean fans experienced watching Ohtani and Suzuki dismantle the tactical assumptions their pitching staffs brought into those games was exactly that moment. The moment where rivalry produces not bitterness but reverence. Where the question stops being how do we beat them and becomes something more fundamental. How do you hate something this beautiful? The answer that Korean fans arrived at, expressed across thousands of posts and comments and conversations that spread far beyond the baseball communities where they originated, was the same answer that American media had arrived at through a completely different path. You do not. You cannot. Not honestly. Not when you actually understand what you are watching. Ohtani and Suzuki did not just perform well in games against Korea. They performed at a level that temporarily suspended the rivalry itself. That replaced the instinct to oppose with something that felt, for Korean fans, both uncomfortable and strangely beautiful. The blown-away feeling that spread through Korean baseball communities was not about defeat. It was about witnessing something that the sport produces rarely, that rivalries almost never deliver, and that international competition at its best occasionally makes possible. Greatness so undeniable that even your fiercest rivals stop and acknowledge it. Fully, honestly, without reservation. That is what Samurai Japan delivered. And that is why Korean fans, despite every instinct their rivalry history had built into them, found themselves asking a question they already knew the answer to. Ohtani and Suzuki have no choice but to walk, right? Right. And somehow that made everything even more extraordinary to watch.